A Victorian scientist sits before a strange machine of brass, ivory and polished metal. He claims it can travel through time, not forwards by minutes or hours, but thousands of years into the future. And when he finally returns, exhausted and terrified, he brings back a story no one is prepared to believe. This is The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Before long, one question hangs over everything. What kind of world awaits humanity in the distant future? And what terrible truth has the time traveller discovered about where civilization may be heading? I'm Roger Braveheart, and a very warm welcome to the 33-Minute Stories channel. These stories are for anyone who has ever wished they had read the great classics at school, but never quite got around to it. Because the story is read to you, you can leave it playing in the background, carry on with another task, and simply listen as the mysterious, dangerous, and extraordinary world of the time machine unfolds. By the end, you'll understand the story well enough to enjoy it, remember it, and sound a little more well-read when it comes up in conversation. My challenge is to summarize this great science fiction classic as an enjoyable story. Okay, so without further delay, let's get cracking. One evening after dinner, in a comfortable room lit by firelight and shaded lamps, the time traveller holds his guests spellbound with an extraordinary argument. The geometry they learned at school, he tells them, is founded on a misconception. A mathematical line has no real existence, nor a plane, nor even a cube, unless it has duration as well as length, breadth, and thickness. Time, he insists, is simply a fourth dimension, no different in kind from the three dimensions of space. The only difference is that our consciousness moves along it in one direction, from the cradle to the grave. An argumentative red-haired guest objects, the doctor raises doubts, and a mayor knits his brows over the idea, but the time traveller presses on. Just as a man in a balloon can rise against gravity, he says, so one day a man might stop or accelerate his drift along the time dimension, or even turn about and travel the other way. The guests laugh at the paradox and joke about the wild possibilities. A historian verifying famous battles, a student taking Greek from the lips of Homer, a speculator hurrying ahead to collect his interest. Then the time traveller tells them he has experimental verification and walks slowly out towards his laboratory. He returns carrying a glittering metallic framework scarcely larger than a small clock, delicately made with ivory in it and some transparent crystalline substance. It is a model, he explains, of a machine to travel through time. One little white lever sends it gliding into the future, another reverses the motion. He asks them to examine the table and satisfy themselves there is no trickery, and then, rather than touch the lever himself, he takes the hand of the psychologist and has him press it with his own finger. They all see the lever turn. There is a breath of wind, the lamp flame jumps, a candle on the mantel blows out, and the little machine swings round, grows indistinct, hangs for a second like a ghost of glittering brass and ivory, and vanishes. Save for the lamp, the table is bare. For a minute, nobody speaks. The psychologist looks under the table and the time traveller laughs and fills his pipe. The model, he says, has travelled into time, though whether into the future or the past he cannot say. When someone objects that it would have been visible to them if it had gone into the past, the psychologist explains that a thing moving through time far faster than its surroundings makes no more impression than the spoke of a spinning wheel or a bullet flying through the air. Then the time traveller takes up the lamp and leads them down a long, draughty corridor to his laboratory. There stands a larger edition of the vanished model, parts of nickel, parts of ivory, parts sawn from rock crystal, nearly complete, with twisted crystalline bars lying unfinished on the bench beside sheets of drawings. The doctor asks if he is perfectly serious, or whether this is another trick like the ghost he showed them last Christmas. The time traveller holds the lamp aloft and answers that upon that machine he intends to explore time, and that he has never been more serious in his life. None of them quite knows how to take it. The following Thursday, the guests gather again at the house on Richmond Hill, but this time the time traveller is not there. A note asks them to begin dinner without him, and promises an explanation when he comes. Around the table are the doctor, the psychologist, a newspaper editor, a journalist, and a quiet bearded guest who never opens his mouth all evening. They speculate about their absent host and joke about time travelling, and the psychologist gives a wooden account of the model machine they saw vanish a week before. He's in the middle of it when the door from the corridor opens slowly, and the time traveller stands before them. He is in an amazing plight. His coat is dusty and smeared with green, his hair disordered, his face ghastly pale and haggard, his chin marked by a half-healed cut. He limps to the table like a footsore tramp, drains a glass of champagne, and begs them to save him some meat. On his feet, one of them notices as he leaves to wash are nothing but tattered, blood-stained socks. When he comes back in evening dress, he eats with the appetite of a starving man, then leads them into the smoking room and makes them promise not to interrupt. He has lived 8 days, he tells them, since 4 o'clock that afternoon, such days as no human being ever lived before. Then he begins his story. That morning, he says, he finished the machine at 10 o'clock, gave it a last tap, and sat in the saddle. He pressed the starting lever and almost immediately the stopping one, and for a moment suspected nothing had happened until he saw the clock. It was nearly 3:30. Gripping the lever with both hands, he went off with a thud. The laboratory grew hazy and dark. His housekeeper came in and crossed the room without seeing him, seeming to shoot across it like a rocket. Night came like the turning out of a lamp, then day, then night again, faster and faster, until the palpitation of darkness and light merged into one continuous greyness. The sun became a streak of fire arching through a deep twilight blue. The moon spun through her quarters. Snow flashed across the world and vanished into spring, a year in a minute and faster still. The sensation was excessively unpleasant, a helpless, headlong feeling like a switchback, yet it swelled into a kind of hysterical exhilaration. At last, curiosity and dread together made him stop. He lugged over the lever, the machine reeled and flung him headlong, and a clap of thunder sounded in his ears. He found himself sitting on soft turf in a little garden, with a pitiless hail hissing round him, and rhododendron blossoms dropping under the beating stones. Beyond the bushes loomed a colossal figure of white marble, a winged sphinx upon a bronze pedestal thick with verdigris, its sightless eyes seeming to watch him, the faint shadow of a smile on its weather-worn lips. As the storm cleared, he saw vast shining buildings and, coming through the bushes, a group of slight creatures in soft, rich robes, barely 4 feet high, beautiful and indescribably frail. One of them walked straight up and laughed into his eyes without a trace of fear, and the time traveller, dizzy and shaken, took his hands from the machine. Very soon the time traveller is surrounded by 8 or 10 of the exquisite little people who touch him with soft hands as if to make sure he is real. There is nothing alarming in them. They have a graceful gentleness, a childlike ease, and they look so frail he fancies he could fling the whole dozen about like 9 pins. Seeing their pink hands feeling at the machine, he reaches over and unscrews the little levers that set it in motion and puts them in his pocket. They are like creatures of Dresden china, with curly hair ending sharply at the neck, singularly minute ears, small red-lipped mouths, pointed chins, and large mild eyes. When he points to the sun to ask where he is, one of them astonishes him by imitating the sound of thunder. The question forms in his mind, are these creatures fools? He had always expected the people of the year 802,000 odd to be incredibly ahead in knowledge and art, and instead one of them asks, on the intellectual level of a 5-year-old child, whether he has come from the sun in a thunderstorm. For a moment he feels he has built the time machine in vain. They garland him with delicate flowers until he is almost smothered in blossom, and lead him into a vast grey edifice of fretted stone, where perhaps 200 of them dine at polished stone tables on heaps of strange fruits. Everything is rich and picturesque, yet dilapidated. Broken, stained glass windows, curtains thick with dust, a floor of white metal blocks worn into deep channels by the feet of past generations. Fruit is their entire diet. Horses, cattle, sheep and dogs have long since followed the ichthyosaurus into extinction. He begins learning their sweet, liquid speech, winning a score of nouns and a verb or two, but his teachers soon tire, for he never met people more indolent or more easily fatigued. That evening, he walks out alone and climbs a crest to survey the world of the year 802,701, the date recorded by the dials of his machine. The Thames has shifted in its bed. Palace-like buildings stand among the greenery, some ruined, some occupied. There are no small houses, no hedges, no signs of property, no evidence of agriculture. The whole earth has become a garden. Sitting on a seat of corroded yellow metal as the sun goes down in flaming gold, he builds his first interpretation of everything he has seen. Humanity, he decides, must have conquered nature at last. Disease has been stamped out, weeds and pests abolished. Population balanced, struggle ended, and under perfect comfort and security, the strength and intelligence that hardship once sharpened have slowly drained away. Strength, he reasons, is the outcome of need, and security sets a premium on feebleness. What remains is a frail, pretty, gentle race, adorning itself with flowers dancing and singing in the sunlight, settling into contented decay. It seems to him a complete and simple explanation, plausible as most wrong theories are. Only later will he discover how far short of the truth it falls. That night, as the full yellow moon rises, the time traveller comes down from his seat to find the place where he can sleep, and looks across at the lawn where he left the machine. A queer doubt chills him, and then certainty strikes like a lash across the face. The lawn is empty. The time machine is gone. The possibility of losing his own age, of being left helpless in this strange new world, grips him at the throat. He runs with great leaping strides down the slope, falls headlong and cuts his face, and runs on with blood trickling down his chin. There is no trace of the machine among the black tangle of bushes, while above him the white leprous face of the sphinx seems to smile in mockery. He raves through the darkened hall where the little people sleep, shaking them and bawling for his machine like an angry child. Some laugh, most look sorely frightened. He beats the bushes until his knuckles are gashed, and at last, worn out, lies down near the sphinx and weeps himself to sleep. Morning brings reason back. The machine cannot have moved in time, he tells himself, because the levers that alone can send it travelling are safe in his pocket. It has been moved in space and hidden. Examining the turf, he finds a groove ripped in it, and strange, narrow footprints like those of a sloth leading towards the bronze pedestal. He raps the panels. They are hollow. His machine, he is sure, is inside the sphinx. But when he beckons the little people and points to the doors, they behave as though he has offered them the last possible insult, and his hammering at the bronze with a river pebble achieves nothing but flaked verdigris. Over the following days he explores and puzzles. He finds deep circular wells rimmed with wrought bronze, down which a steady current of air is sucked towards a distant thudding of machinery. He notices that there are no old or infirm among this people, And no workshops, no shops, no sign of how anything is made or kept going. Then one morning, watching the little people bathe, he sees one of them seized with cramp and drifting downstream, while the others make not the slightest attempt at rescue. He slips off his clothes, wades in, and draws the drowning creature safe to land. That afternoon she finds him again and presents him with a big garland of flowers made for him alone. Her name is Weena, and for a week she is his devoted companion, wanting to be with him always, kissing his hands, giving his return each evening almost the feeling of coming home. From Weena he learns that fear has not left the world after all. She is fearless in daylight, but she dreads the dark with a singular passion, and after sunset the little people gather into the great houses and sleep in droves. Then, in the grey of one dawn, he glimpses white ape-like figures flitting up the hill, and later, groping through a dark gallery of a ruin, he comes face to face with one, a dull, white, spiderish thing with huge greyish-red eyes that flees from the light and vanishes down one of the wells. Gradually the truth dawns on him. Man has not remained one species, but has differentiated into two distinct animals, and this bleached, nocturnal thing is also heir to all the ages. For 2 days, the time-traveller shrinks from following his clue, repelled by the thought of those pallid bodies, filthily cold to the touch, and never feeling quite safe at his back. At last he resolves to waste no more time, and one early morning he sets out for a well near the ruins of granite and aluminium. Little Weena dances beside him until she sees him lean over the mouth of the shaft. Then she gives a piteous cry and pulls at him with her tiny hands. He kisses her goodbye, puts her gently down, and begins to clamber down the metal bars projecting from the walls. The descent is perhaps 200 yards, and the bars were made for creatures far smaller and lighter than himself. One of them bends suddenly under his weight and nearly swings him off into the blackness. Above him the mouth of the well shrinks to a small blue disc, where Weena's head shows as a round black projection, and then she is gone. Far below, the thudding of a great machine grows louder and more oppressive. Cramped, aching and trembling, he slips sideways into a narrow horizontal tunnel and lies down to rest. He is roused by a soft hand touching his face. He strikes a match and sees 3 stooping white creatures hastily retreating from the light. Following the throb of machinery, he comes into a vast arched cavern, where great shapes like big machines rise out of the dimness, and the faint halitus of freshly shed blood hangs in the stuffy air. By matchlight he glimpses a little table of white metal laid with a meal, and a red joint upon it. The Morlocks, for that is the name of these underworld creatures, are carnivorous, and he wonders what large animal could have survived to furnish such meat. Then the match stings his fingers and falls, and in the darkness lank hands come feeling over his face, plucking at his clothing, gently disengaging his box of matches. He shouts, strikes his last matches one after another, and fights his way back to the shaft, kicking free of their persistent fingers and climbing until he staggers out into the blinding sunlight, where Weena kisses his hands and ears before he sinks into insensibility. Now his theory of the world turns upside down. Long ago, he supposes, the widening gulf between the comfortable rich and the labouring poor pushed one race into the sunlit pleasure of the surface, and the other into the tunnels of industry, until they became 2 species, the Aloy above and the Morlocks below. But the old order has reversed. The Eloi are no longer the masters. They possess the earth only on sufferance, like fatted cattle which the Morlocks preserve and prey upon. And with a sudden shiver to the strange stars of a night spent watching on a hillside, with Weena asleep beside him, the clear knowledge comes to him of what the meat he saw in the underworld must have been. With the dark of the moon approaching, When the nights will be at their blackest, he determines to find a safe refuge, make weapons, and recover his machine. Remembering a distant palace of green porcelain he once glimpsed from the hills, he sets off towards it with Weena riding like a child upon his shoulder. The palace of green porcelain, when they reach it about noon, is deserted and falling into ruin, its windows empty of glass, great sheets of green facing fallen from the corroded framework. Within, instead of a hall, they find a long gallery thick with dust, and the time traveller realises he is standing in a museum, the derelict remains of some latter-day South Kensington. The lower part of a huge skeleton stands gaunt in the centre, some extinct creature after the fashion of the Megatherium, and further on lies the great bony barrel of a Brontosaurus. There are sloping shelves and the familiar glass cases of his own time, some so well sealed that their contents are fairly preserved. Gallery after gallery opened before them, fossils and minerals, shriveled vestiges of stuffed animals, the brown dust of departed plants, and then a colossal hall of ancient machines, corroded and broken, rising on either side of a floor that slopes down into darkness. Weena presses close to his side in growing fear, and in the dust ahead he sees small, narrow footprints. From the remote blackness comes a peculiar pattering he has heard before, down the well. Seizing a lever that projects from one of the machines, he puts all his weight upon it until it snaps, and rejoins Weena with an iron mace in his hand. More than sufficient, he judges, for any Morlock skull he might encounter. Further on they find a gallery of books, long since dropped to pieces, nothing left but brown and charred rags, warped boards, and cracked metallic clasps, an enormous waste of labour. Then, in a gallery of technical chemistry, fortune smiles on him. In one truly airtight case he finds a box of matches, perfectly good, not even damp, and he is so overjoyed that he performs a solemn dance upon the thick carpet of dust for Weena's delight. He finds a sealed jar of camphor too, which will burn with a bright flame, and pockets it as an excellent candle. 2 dynamite cartridges raise his hopes of blasting the bronze doors, but when he tests one in a side gallery, nothing happens. They're dummies. Towards sunset they rest in a little open court among fruit trees, and he resolves to pass the night in the open, protected by fire, and to reach the white sphinx in the morning. They set out while the sun is still above the horizon, gathering sticks and dried grass as they go. But night falls before they reach the dark wood, and among the black bushes behind them he sees 3 crouching figures. On impulse he lights his heap of firewood to cover their retreat, then plunges into the forest with Weena in his arms. The Morlocks close around them in the blackness, cooing softly, tugging at his coat. He puts Weena down to strike a match, and when it flares he finds her lying motionless at his feet. He builds a fire, drives the creatures back with burning camphor, and then, overcome by smoke and sleeplessness, he nods, and wakes to find the fire out, the matches gone, and soft bodies heaped upon him like a monstrous spider's web. He fights with his iron bar in the dark until a red glow grows among the trees. His first fire has spread, and the whole forest is ablaze. The Morlocks flee, blinded, blundering into the flames, and when the white light of morning comes, he searches the ashes again and again. But Weena is gone. About 8 or 9 in the morning, lame and almost exhausted, the time traveller comes to the same seat of yellow metal from which he surveyed the world on the evening of his arrival. The scene is unchanged. The abundant foliage, the splendid palaces and magnificent ruins, the silver river running between its fertile banks, the gay robes of the beautiful people moving among the trees. Some are bathing in the very place where he saved Weena, and the sight gives him a keen stab of pain. He thinks of his confident first evening and laughs bitterly. He understands now what all that beauty covers. The little people live as pleasantly as cattle in a field. Like the cattle, they know of no enemies and provide against no needs. and their end is the same. He grieves to think how brief the dream of the human intellect has been. It set itself towards comfort and ease, towards a balanced society with security and permanency as its watchword, attained its hopes and came to this. There is a law of nature we overlook, he tells his listeners. Intellectual versatility is the compensation for change, danger, and trouble, and there is no intelligence where there is no change and no need of change. The upper world drifted towards feeble prettiness, the underworld towards mere mechanical industry, and when the old arrangements faltered, necessity came back, and she began below. Tired out by grief and terror, he spreads himself upon the turf in the warm sunlight, and sleeps until nearly sunset. Then he takes his crowbar and goes down the hill towards the white sphinx, ready to force the bronze doors at last. And now comes a most unexpected thing. As he approaches the pedestal, he finds the bronze valves already open, slid down into their grooves. He stops short, hesitating to enter. Within is a small apartment, and on a raised place in the corner stands the time machine, carefully oiled and cleaned, as though the Morlocks had been trying in their dim way to grasp its purpose. After all his elaborate preparations for a siege, here is a meek surrender. He throws his iron bar away, almost sorry not to use it. Yet even as he stoops towards the portal, a sudden thought tells him the truth. For once, he grasps the mental operations of the Morlocks. This open door is a trap. He steps through the bronze frame anyway, suppressing a strong inclination to laugh. He is examining the machine, taking pleasure in the mere touch of it, when the bronze panels slide up behind him with a clang, and he is in the dark. He can hear the murmuring laughter of the Morlocks as they close in. Very calmly he tries to strike a match and discovers the cruel detail he has overlooked. The loose matches in his pocket are of that abominable kind that light only on the box, and the box is lost in the forest. What follows is a desperate scramble in the blackness, a nearer thing even than the fight among the burning trees. Hands clutch at him as he feels for the levers and the studs they fit over. One lever is nearly torn away, and he has to butt in the dark with his head to recover it, hearing a Morlock skull ring. Then at last, the lever is fixed and pulled over. The clinging hands slip from him, the darkness falls from his eyes, and he is free, rushing through time once more. Flung forward on the machine, half-seated and unstable, the time traveller does not stop at his own age. When he brings himself to look at the dials, he is amazed. One hand records days, another thousands, another millions, and the thousands hand is sweeping round as fast as the seconds hand of a watch into futurity. A peculiar change creeps over the appearance of things. The palpitating greyness grows darker. The blinking succession of day and night returns, but slower and slower, until the alternations seem to stretch through centuries. At last, a steady twilight broods over the earth, broken only when a comet glares across the darkling sky. The sun has ceased to set, it simply rises and falls in the west, growing ever broader and more red, until it halts motionless upon the horizon, a vast dome glowing with dull heat. The moon has vanished, the stars have slowed to creeping points of light, and he understands that the work of the tidal drag is done. The earth has come to rest with one face forever to the sun. Very cautiously, remembering his former headlong fall, he reverses his motion and stops gently on a desolate beach. The sky is inky black to the northeast, where pale white stars shine steadily, and glowing scarlet to the southeast, where the huge hull of the sun lies cut by the horizon. The rocks are a harsh reddish colour, blotched with intensely green lichen, the only life he can see at first. The air is rarefied and hurts his lungs. A still, oily sea rises and falls like a gentle breathing, its margin crusted with salt pink under the lurid sky. Far up the slope he hears a harsh scream and sees a thing like a huge white butterfly go fluttering up and away. Then a reddish mass he took for rock begins to move towards him, and he sees it is a monstrous crab-like creature as large as a table, its many legs moving slowly, its big claws swaying, its stalked eyes gleaming, its long antennae waving and feeling like carters' whips. As he stares, a tickling on his cheek makes him turn, and he finds he has grasped the antenna of a second monster standing just behind him, its evil eyes wriggling on their stalks, its vast claws smeared with algal slime descending upon him. In a moment, his hand is on the lever, and he has put a month between himself and these monsters, only to find the same beach crawling with dozens of them. On he travels, in great strides of 1,000 years or more, drawn by the mystery of the earth's fate, watching the sun grow larger and duller, and the life of the old earth ebb away. At last, more than 30 million years hence, the crawling crabs have disappeared. A bitter cold assails him. Snow eddies down upon the red beach, and the salt ocean lies bloody under the eternal sunset. Then a concavity appears in the sun's rim and grows. An eclipse is beginning, or perhaps the transit of some inner planet. Darkness thickens, a moaning wind rises, the white peaks vanish one by one, and in the last rayless obscurity he sees, against the weltering blood-red water, a round black thing with trailing tentacles, hopping fitfully upon a sandbank. Sick, frozen, and seized with horror at the great darkness, he clings to the saddle and begins the long journey home. So the time traveller comes back. For a long time he must lie insensible upon the machine, and then awareness returns with the familiar blinking succession of the days and nights. The sun grows golden again, the sky blue. He breathes with greater freedom as the air thickens. The fluctuating contours of the land ebb and flow, and the hands spin backward upon the dials. At last he sees again the dim shadows of houses, the evidences of decadent humanity, and these too change and pass, and others come. When the million dial stands at 0, he slackens speed and begins to recognize the pretty, familiar architecture of his own age. The thousand's hand runs back to the starting point. The night and day flap slower and slower, and then the old walls of the laboratory come round him. Very gently now, he slows the mechanism down. One little thing strikes him as odd on the way. When he set out, before his velocity grew too great, his housekeeper had walked across the laboratory, seeming to him to shoot across the room like a rocket. Now, returning, he passes again across that same minute, and her every motion appears to be the exact inversion of what it was. The door at the lower end opens, and she glides quietly backwards up the laboratory, back foremost, and disappears behind the door by which she had entered. Just before that, he seems to see a figure for a moment, but it passes like a flash. Then he stops the machine and sees about him again the old familiar laboratory, his tools, his appliances, just as he left them. He gets off the thing very shakily and sits down upon his bench, trembling violently for several minutes before he grows calmer. Around him is his old workshop, exactly as it had been. He might have slept there, and the whole thing have been a dream. And yet, not exactly. The machine had started from the southeast corner of the laboratory, and it has come to rest again in the northwest, against the wall. That, he tells his guests, gives the exact distance from his little lawn in the world of the Eloi to the pedestal of the white sphinx, into which the Morlocks carried his machine while he wandered 800,000 years from home. For a time his brain goes stagnant. Presently he gets up and comes through the passage, limping because his heel is still painful, feeling sorely begrimed. On the table by the door he sees the evening paper, finds the date is indeed today, and looking at the timepiece sees the hour is almost 8 o'clock. He hears the voices of his guests and the clatter of plates and hesitates, feeling sick and weak. Then he sniffs good, wholesome meat and opens the door upon them. That, he says, is the whole of his adventure. He washed, he dined, and now sitting back in his chair in the smoking room, with most of his listeners in shadow, and only the little lamp lighting his white, sincere face, he brings the strangest story any of them has ever heard to its close. When the story ends, there is a momentary stillness, and then chairs begin to creak and shoes to scrape upon the carpet. The time traveller looks round at his guests and tells them he cannot expect to be believed. They may take it all as a lie, or a prophecy, or a dream he dreamed in the workshop. They may treat his assertion of its truth as a mere stroke of art. The newspaper editor stands up with a sigh, puts a hand on his shoulder and says, "What a pity it is he is not a writer of stories." Even the time traveller lighting his pipe admits that he hardly believes it himself. And yet his eye falls with a mute inquiry upon 2 withered white flowers lying on the little table, the flowers Weiner put into his pocket in the distant future, and turning over the hand that holds his pipe, he looks at the half-healed scars upon his knuckles. The doctor rises, comes to the lamp, and examines the flowers, confessing that he certainly does not know their natural order, and asks if he may have them. The time traveller hesitates, then answers suddenly, "Certainly not." Where did he really get them, the doctor presses, and the time traveller puts his hand to his head like one trying to keep hold of an idea that eludes him. They were put into his pocket by Weiner, he says, when he travelled into time. Then he stares round the room and cries that it is all going, that the atmosphere of every day is too much for his memory, and he must look at the machine if there is one. He catches up the lamp and they follow him down the corridor, and there the thing stands sure enough, squat, ugly, askew, brass and ebony and ivory and glimmering quartz, with brown spots and smears upon the ivory, bits of grass and moss upon the lower parts, and one rail bent awry. It is 1:45 when the guests leave. The guest who has told us all this shares a cab with the editor, who calls the tale a gaudy lie, but he himself lies awake most of the night, unable to come to a conclusion, for the story was so fantastic, and the telling so credible and sober. The next day he goes back to the house and finds the time traveller with a small camera under one arm and a knapsack under the other. "Is it not some hoax?" he asks. "Do you really travel through time?" "Really and truly I do," the time traveller answers, looking frankly into his eyes, and promises that if his guest will stay to lunch, he will prove everything up to the hilt, specimens and all. The guest waits, then remembers another engagement, and goes down the passage to take his leave. As he takes hold of the laboratory door, he hears an exclamation oddly truncated, a click and a thud. A gust of air whirls round him as he opens the door, and there is a sound of broken glass falling. The laboratory is empty. For a moment he seems to see a ghostly, indistinct figure sitting in a whirling mass of black and brass, so transparent that the bench behind it is distinct, and then the phantasm vanishes. The time machine is gone, save for a subsiding stir of dust, and a pane of the skylight has been blown in. The servant, coming in from the garden, is certain no one has passed. That was 3 years ago, and the time traveller has never returned. Perhaps he swept back into the past, among the blood-drinking savages of the unpolished Stone Age, or the great reptiles of the Jurassic seas. Perhaps he went forward into some nearer age, where the riddles of our own time are answered. No one can choose but wonder, and the guest he left behind keeps by him, for comfort, 2 strange white flowers, shriveled now, and brown and flat and brittle, to witness that even when mind and strength had gone, gratitude and a mutual tenderness still lived on in the heart of man. When I sit with this story, what strikes me most is that the author is not really writing about machines at all. I think he's writing about us, about what we are doing to ourselves in our own comfortable world. The time traveller expects the future to be a triumph, and what he finds is a warning. I believe the book suggests that a civilization can aim so single-mindedly at comfort, ease, and security that it destroys the very qualities that made it strong. The beautiful, feeble people of the Garden Earth are what becomes of humanity when every struggle is removed. No danger, no work, no need to think, and so, in the end, no thought left. The story keeps returning to one hard idea, that strength is the outcome of need, and security sets a premium on feebleness. I think the author wants us to ask whether our own progress might carry the seed of that same quiet decay. I also believe the book is a pointed criticism of the class divisions of its day. The split of humanity into two species does not come from nature. In the time traveller's own explanation, it grows out of the widening gulf between the rich above ground and the workers below it, between the haves and the have-nots. The author may be drawing attention to the underground railways, workrooms and factories already around him, and asking what happens if the labouring world is pushed ever further from the sunlight, while the comfortable classes fence off the pretty country for themselves. In the story, that arrangement comes home with a vengeance. The descendants of the masters end as fatted cattle for the descendants of their servants. I read that as a grim warning that injustice never stays settled, and that necessity, as the book says, comes back. There is something quieter here too. The journey to the dying earth, with its huge red sun, its crabs, its snow, and its terrible silence, seems to me a reminder of how small and temporary humanity is, with whole nations, languages, and aspirations swept away while the stars rearrange themselves overhead. Yet the author does not leave us in despair. The final image is not the darkness, but two withered white flowers, kept as a witness that gratitude and mutual tenderness still lived in the human heart, even when mind and strength had gone. I think that may be his last word. The future may be black and blank, of vast ignorance, but kindness is worth carrying into it, and since we cannot know what is coming, we can only choose to live as though civilization were not doomed to fall back upon its makers. Thank you for staying till the end of the time machine. You obviously are a glutton for punishment. Please hit the like icon if you thought this video deserves it, so other people get to see it. Let me know in the comments which book you would like me to read to you next. Now YouTube have put on screen a channel subscribe icon, and below it my latest video for you to check out. See you next time.